Traders, how are you? With Marcello. We're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. First full week of 2022. We have a conspiracy theory about Bitcoin, which I thought was pretty interesting. Oil going up, markets crashing, right? Bitcoin is just going down, well, normal percentage wise for Bitcoin, but everybody else thinks that it's cratering, right? Because we're not used to such big moves. We got a lot going on. Let's go ahead and get started. So overall, we have the S&P 500, which rose 27% in 2021, hitting 70 all-time highs, most new records since 1954. And for the first time in history, all the S&P 500 sectors reached double-digit gains. So because of that, and due to the fact that we have extremely elevated numbers, like 26 times earnings. If you guys don't know what that is, basically it's a calculations that people use to look at the valuation of what the market is, and 26 times earnings, meaning that the price of a stock is 26 times what the earnings are on average for all the stocks inside the S&P 500 is extremely high. A lot of investors are now wondering if not only the stock market, but if companies can continue to produce at an amazing rate that they produced over last year. U.S. stocks for the week are mostly lower this week, mainly for the concerns that the Fed is going to be a lot more aggressive. They had a report out on Wednesday. They're a lot more hawkish, which basically means that they're not going to help the economy as much. That it's in layman's terms, that's what it means. Overall for the week, the U.S. markets were negative. The Dow was negative 0.29%. The S&P 500 was negative 1.90%. And the NASDAQ went down 4.74%. And in another, let's say, signal or flag that we're in super bubble territory, we finally have hit a historic year for mergers and acquisitions in 2021. There was a record number of 5.8 trillion of these transactions, which was an increase of 64% from 2020 to 21. The previous record was 4.55 trillion, which is in 2007, which was a year or two, depending on who you ask, of when the actual financial crisis happened. So now we're in another record. We could be maybe a year or two away from another financial crisis. Who knows? Now, even though we had these historic numbers, the U.S. took about half of that, 2.5 trillion of mergers and acquisitions in the U.S., even though we have a lot more tougher antitrust environment under Biden. European markets mostly higher. The emerging market of Istanbul took the crown there in Europe. If you consider Turkey part of Europe, they went up 9.45%. The next biggest winner was the FTSE in London, which is 1.36%. Latin American and Canadian markets mostly lower, with Canada going down 0.41%. I should say the communist dictatorship of Canada. And Africa, if I have any Canadian viewers out there, just leave me a note there, see how things are going out there. I have some Canadian friends that actually just skipped town to Mexico where there's a little bit more freedom. Africa and the Middle East, Nigeria, most positive of all at 3.76%. And then the far east, we have Singapore at 2.61% positive, with the Indian Sensex not too far behind at 2.55%. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency news. The Kazakhstan president, which is, if you guys don't know where Kazakhstan is, it's in the center of Asia, right below Russia, and then we have all the Asian countries kind of wrapping around it. They had quite a bit of a situation where there was a huge manifestations and riots in regards to the lockdowns and the measures pressured by the government. The president of Kazakhstan literally brought in Russian troops, and he said, shoot to kill, essentially. He literally said that. And one of the things that I found interesting is that the second largest mining operation in countries is Kazakhstan. So you have the US at number 1, and then you have Kazakhstan at number 2. 18% of all of the mining in crypto is done in Kazakhstan. And I just found it to be a little bit unusual that all of a sudden we got this, normally you don't hear a lot of news about Kazakhstan, right? But all of a sudden we got this big problem that is shut down the internet. That means no crypto mining. And so that's part of the reason why we had that big crash in crypto. Not only that, it has to do with the dollar and the Fed, which I'll explain to you guys in a minute. But I thought that was really unusual. Peru is also presenting laws to be able to regulate crypto, mainly digital wallets and also the exchanges. One of the things that it does establish is that it is solely the responsibility of the buyer when it comes to buying Bitcoin. And I think this is because they've seen people's money being lost and exchanges evaporating, not in third world countries like Pakistan or Bangladesh or Nigeria. We're talking about Canada and South Korea, where people have lost hundreds of millions of dollars because of exchanges that were registered in these countries just literally just disappeared from one day to the next. Other than that, Bitcoin mostly lower, down 14.95% to 41,352.50. Most cryptos across the board completely collapsed. Obviously, in terms of percentage-wise, for most crypto investors, it's not really much, but obviously most people still don't invest in cryptos, and it's quite a big swing. Other than that, commodities climbed to a 7-week high on Wednesday, mainly due to supply constraints from OPEC to North America. That also offset the restrictions and the lockdowns in China. The city of Xi'an, which is literally just completely locked down. People can't even go to the grocery store. They're bartering items now. So people at home are bartering products for food and things like that. And also we have a deep freeze in Canada and the northern US, which is disrupting a lot of oil flows, boosting prices just as the US stockpiles decline. Remember that Biden is going to release a lot of the oil from the strategic reserve to be able to go ahead and try and drop the oil prices, which hasn't really worked that well. US crude went up 4.90% to $78.90, while international Brent went up 5.10% to $81.75. World food prices, I put this in here because I think food, essentially it's a commodity, right? We're talking about wheat and rice and these kinds of things. 10-year high for world food prices. They went up 28% in 2021, and the UN agency is now warning of persistent price tensions in 2022. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that you guys probably didn't know is that the actual fertilizer, well, let me backtrack a little bit. 28%. Meanwhile, the government is telling us that the inflation is only 5.8% or 6.2%. Let's just call it 6% even. You see how things work, right? That's why I always like to do these videos so you guys can learn how to actually read what's going on. I'm sure you guys feel it at the grocery store. I know you guys aren't paying just 6% more when you go to buy food, right? Or fill up your truck or your car. So keep that in mind. So the actual price of fertilizer, right? People have to buy fertilizer in order to go ahead and make food, right? Has gone up for the ingredients, has gone up an average of 134%, which with some going up as high as 210%. So another thing to keep an eye on as well is that one of the things that it takes to make fertilizer, which is something called urea, a key fertilizer component, is synthesized out of natural gas. Now, natural gas is needed to make ammonia. So essentially, right, without talking all these weird names at you, essentially if natural gas goes up, the percentage of food to make the food is going to go up because you have to buy the fertilizer, and a key component of the fertilizer is synthesized with natural gas. Does that make sense? So I watched a video of a farmer who spent, I believe it was $89,000 for this big, huge pail full of fertilizer. And then this year he spent, I think it was over 170,000, 174 rings a bell. So he even paid more than 100%. So get ready for prices to go up a lot higher in 2022, because I think now companies are going to start passing those increased costs to their customers when they weren't doing it last year, because a lot of the government officials and the Fed was saying that the inflation was transitory. So now that they know that it's not transitory, they're not going to help us out and not raise prices, right? They're not going to make less profit. So get ready, start trading, do some investing, because build your side hustle up, because it's coming. It's going to come hard this year. If you thought 2021 was hard, it's going to come fast in 2022. Precious metals lower for the week as well. Gold went down 1.77% to 1,798, while silver went down 4.18% to $22.46. Metals are reeling off the surprisingly hawkish rep from Fed Wednesday afternoon. So they're essentially, what I told you guys before, On Wednesday, there was a Fed meeting, which is the central bank of the United States. And in layman's terms, looks like they're going to be a little bit more aggressive in not helping the economy as much, which means increasing the interest rates and also stop the quantitative easing, which is literally us just creating money and buying our own debt with it. Now, if they do increase interest rates, that's very bullish for the dollar. So if the dollar goes up, a lot of the commodities that are listed in dollars, which is essentially everything, goes down. Right, so that's part of the reasons why precious metals went down, and that's the other reason as well why we had this situation where we had that crypto collapse, because now we have a situation where the dollar is going to go higher, and a lot of these items that are considered inflation hedges, right, like Bitcoin, a lot of people consider, at least young people, that Bitcoin is their digital gold per se, right? So that obviously brings a lot of pressure down on those items. Financial and banking news, banking investment giant HSBC, which if the numbers haven't changed, seventh largest bank in the world and the largest bank in Europe. Their pre-tax profit rose 75% to $5.8 billion, way above what expectations were, which was $3.34 billion. The Eurozone Consumer Prices Index also rose 5%, which was a record. It went up from 4.9% in November as food prices surged even higher. Now we have the ECB, which is the European Central Bank, trying to persuade households and businesses that, and it's temporary, don't worry, the prices are going to return back to normal soon. We're not buying it. And the benchmark U.S. Treasury yield surged to their highest level in 2 years. The 10-year almost hitting that 2% mark. And the 10-year is important because mortgages are tied, or are referenced, I should say, to that 10-year note. So essentially, if rates start creeping up, less people buy homes, that market starts to cool down. If we remember, I believe the percentage of the housing market is about 13-14% of the actual economy in the United States. So if we see 10-13% of the economy go, 15% of the economy go, then that's going to start to cause the reverberations throughout the rest of the economy and then eventually the world economy. Political news, Portugal's ruling center-left socialists remain the favorites to win the snap parliamentary election in January 30th. The commanding Socialist Party has 38% support. In Latin America as well, we have the Brazil and Colombia is also going to have elections. Macri in Argentina lost his place to the socialists in Argentina. Chile, which is still the only first world country. We'll see for how long. They just voted in literally socialists there as well. So it seems like the entire world is gonna live this socialist paradise that we have in Cuba, Venezuela, and Argentina. In economic news, U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics on Friday said that the non-farm payrolls grew by 199,000 in December, where the expectation was 422,000. The unemployment rate fell to 3.9%, which is a 22-month low, but the employment is still 3.6 million jobs below the peak of 2020. So you see how it works, right? They say, well, the unemployment is at a record low. We haven't seen these good numbers since 2022. It's great. But what they don't tell you, for example, is that there's less people working now than there was in February 2020. It's called the labor participation rate, which is the amount of working age Americans that have a job or are looking for one, remains unchanged at 61.9%, below the rate of February 2020 of 63.4%. And this is part of the problem of why we have all of these shutdowns and supply chain issues, because the government is continuing to give these checks out to people, which means that people aren't going out and looking for work because they just would prefer not to. Obviously, it's easier to make a little bit less and just not have to pay for gas and leave my house, and right? So you see how they wiggle that fancy number over here and say, oh, look how great things are. Yeah, it's amazing. But in reality, things are not as great as they claim. Corporate shares, Tesla crushed their earnings more than anything, their deliveries. They reported, if I'm not mistaken, the exact number was close to 1 million deliveries. Their shares surged 13.53%. They're doing great in terms of numbers. Ford Motor Company as well skyrocketed on Tuesday over 11.67% due to the fact that a lot of people have the demand for the new F-150 Lightning, which is their electric truck. And if you didn't know, the F-150 is the best-selling vehicle in the United States in 40 years. So this is literally a game changer. When they come out with this truck, it's literally the truck that everybody buys in the United States. The truck that not most people, but the best-selling vehicle for the last 40 years. So now that they're getting into the electric space, it's kind of mainstream now. In technology, starting in the summer, all new cars that are sold in the EU are going to have a black box accessible by the authorities, which was going to record all of the driving data of the vehicle. It's going to start in July 6, 2022. So if you guys are in Europe, all of Europe outside of the UK, you probably should buy a car before that date. So they're not literally, what's the worst that can happen? They're not going to spy on you. Like Alexa's not going to listen in on you, what you say, or your Google phone or your Android phone or your Apple phone. They're not going to record your private data and sell it. No, they would never do that. Investment news, Evergrand halted trading on Hong Kong on Monday. They're still struggling to repay $300 billion in liabilities. I read an article that this company has more debt than companies like Apple and Amazon combined, Facebook, and they have nowhere near the amount of revenue, which gives you the kind of idea of the amount of money that we're talking about here with this company. They've lost 89% of their valuation last year. And the highly contagious Omicron is disrupting already stressed food supply chains, with so many workers becoming ill because it's super, super contagious. But thank God it's not as lethal. A lot of grocery stores, every piece of the supply chain from farms to manufacturers to distributors are having labor shortfalls. So remember, we talked about the price of food already skyrocketing because the input prices are skyrocketing. Now we have another problem where there's not even enough workers. So if there's not enough workers and not enough products, the same amount of people are going to want to buy the same amount of products. Supply and demand, there's skyrocketing demand and a lot less supply. What's going to happen to prices? So you see how it's literally getting hit from every angle. And in international events, the IDF, which is Israel Defense Forces, carried out retaliatory airstrikes against Gaza on Saturday night after 2 rockets from Gaza hit Tel Aviv on Saturday morning. Thousands of people in Amsterdam on Sunday were protesting the COVID-19 lockdown measures. I don't know if you saw the video. It was pretty scary, where a dog literally was biting a guy's arm and wouldn't let go, obviously because it's for your safety. And Colombia's leftist rebel National Liberation Army, otherwise known as ELN, took responsibility for the attack on the 3rd largest city in Cali. If you guys are going to come to Colombia, I'm in Medellin right now. It's still a beautiful place. It's a beautiful 60 degrees at night, 70, 80 during the day. And there's no problems here in Medellin because it's Medellin. And other than that, ongoing extreme weather in Alaska and unusual facts brought record temperatures with torrential downpours, leaving what they're calling an ice-mageddon. Unprecedented series of winter rains, and due to the cold, it's literally blocking off roads because of all the ice and choking traffic in the 2nd largest city in Alaska, which is Fairbanks. And in addition to that, after becoming extinct in 1952, the cheetah is set to return to the Indian Free Range. The central government launched an action plan to be able to deliver 50 of the large cats and introduce them in the next 5 years. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.